The rain hammered against the windscreen like 1,000 angry fists. Eleanor Hart gripped the helicopter controls with steady hands, her knuckles white beneath her flight gloves. She had flown through storms before. Hundreds of them. 25 years with the Royal Air Force Search and Rescue had taught her to respect the weather, but never to fear it. "Control, this is Rescue 7-3. We're approaching the coordinates now." Eleanor spoke into her headset, her voice calm despite the violent shaking of the aircraft. "Copy that, 7-3. Be advised, wind speeds increasing to 45 knots, storm cell moving faster than predicted." The controller's voice crackled back. Beside her, Sarah Mitchell adjusted her harness and checked the rescue equipment one more time. Sarah had been Eleanor's co-pilot for 8 years. They were more than colleagues. They were friends, sisters in the sky. "Looks rough down there, Elle," Sarah said, peering through the side window at the churning North Sea below. Dark waves reached up toward them like grasping fingers. "We've seen worse," Eleanor replied, though her gut told her something different. This storm felt wrong. The air pressure was dropping faster than the instruments could register. They were responding to a distress call from a fishing vessel. 3 men trapped on a sinking boat, 20 miles off the Scottish coast. It was the kind of mission they had done countless times. Routine, standard. Except nothing about this night felt standard. The helicopter bucked hard to the left. Eleanor corrected immediately, her hands moving with practiced precision. The engines screamed as she fought to maintain altitude. 7-3, we're reading unstable air patterns. Consider aborting mission, Control advised. Eleanor looked at Sarah. Her co-pilot's face was set with determination. They both knew what aborting meant. 3 men would die. That was not acceptable. Not while they had fuel and functioning equipment. "Negative, Control. We have visual on the vessel. Proceeding with rescue." Sarah gave her a small nod. Trust. That's what made them such a good team. Complete and absolute trust. Eleanor brought the helicopter into position above the fishing boat. The waves were enormous now, swelling and crashing over the deck. She could see the 3 fishermen huddled near the wheelhouse, their orange life jackets bright against the dark water. "Lowering the winch," Sarah announced, moving to the cargo door. The wind screamed as she opened it, instantly filling the cabin with freezing rain and sea spray. The rescue went smoothly at first. The winch operator, David, worked the cable with expert skill. One by one, the fishermen were lifted from the doomed vessel. First man up, second man up. Eleanor held the helicopter steady, fighting the wind with every muscle in her body. The 3rd fisherman was halfway up when it happened. A lightning strike, not close, not directly on them, but close enough. The electromagnetic pulse hit their systems like a bomb. The cockpit went dark. Every instrument died. The engines coughed, sputtered, and then roared back to life, but the damage was done. The flight controls felt loose, unresponsive. "We're hit! Systems failure!" Eleanor shouted, her training kicking in immediately. Emergency protocols ran through her mind like a checklist. Sarah was back in her seat in seconds, hands flying over the backup controls. "Hydraulics are gone. We're losing pressure." The helicopter began to spin. Slowly at first, then faster. Eleanor tried every trick she knew, every technique from decades of flying. But the machine was dying beneath her. They were going down. "Mayday! Mayday! This is Rescue 7-3. We are going down. Repeat, we are going down." Sarah transmitted, her voice professional even as terror flashed in her eyes. "Prepare for water landing," Eleanor commanded. It was not really a landing. It was a controlled crash. Maybe. Time seemed to slow down. Eleanor could see every detail. Sarah's hands on her harness, David securing the rescued fisherman in the back. The altimeter spinning backward, 200 feet, 100 feet, 50 feet. "Brace! Brace! Brace!" Eleanor shouted. The impact was catastrophic. Metal screamed. Water exploded through the fracturing windscreen. The helicopter hit the surface at an angle. one rotor blade slicing into a wave before snapping off. The aircraft flipped, rolled, and began to sink immediately.
Cold. The first thing Eleanor registered was the impossible cold. The North Sea in February was barely above freezing. It felt like 1,000 knives stabbing into her skin. She was underwater, upside down, strapped into her seat, training. Don't panic. Orient yourself. Find the exit. Her hands found the harness release. Click. Free. She kicked toward what she hoped was up. Her lungs screamed for air. The world was dark and cold and spinning. She broke the surface gasping. Waves crashed over her head immediately. She spun around searching. Sarah! Sarah! Debris floated everywhere. Pieces of rotor blade, seat cushions. A life raft had auto-deployed, bright yellow against the black water. David! Sarah! Anyone! Eleanor screamed into the wind. She saw David surface 20 yards away, one arm around the rescued fisherman. They were swimming toward the life raft. Good. But where was Sarah? Sarah. Eleanor dove under, eyes burning in the salt water. The helicopter was gone, swallowed by the depths. But there, she saw something. A flash of orange, a flight suit. Sarah was floating just beneath the surface, unconscious. Maybe worse. Eleanor swam harder than she had ever swum in her life. She grabbed Sarah's harness and kicked upward. They broke the surface together. Sarah's face was pale. Too pale. No, 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 no. Sarah, stay with me. Eleanor pulled her toward the life raft. The distance seemed impossible. Every wave threatened to tear them apart. Hands reached down. David pulled them both into the raft. Eleanor immediately started chest compressions. She had done this before. She was a trained rescue swimmer. She could do this. Come on, Sarah. Breathe, breathe. 30 compressions, 2 breaths, 30 compressions, 2 breaths. Please, Sarah, don't leave me, please. But Sarah's eyes remained closed. Her lips were turning blue. The rescue took 90 minutes. Another helicopter from a different base finally reached them. By the time they were lifted to safety, by the time they reached the hospital, by the time the doctors came out with their solemn faces and gentle words, Eleanor knew. Sarah Mitchell was gone. The funeral was on a gray Tuesday, the kind of day that matched Eleanor's soul. Sarah's husband stood at the graveside with their 2 daughters, aged 10 and 12. Their faces were pale and lost. Eleanor could barely look at them. It's not your fault, people kept saying. The investigation board said it. Sarah's husband said it. The RAF psychologist said it. But Eleanor knew better. She should have aborted the mission. The signs were all there. The pressure drop. The storm cell moving faster than predicted. Her gut instinct screaming that something was wrong. But she had ignored all of it. 3 fishermen alive. 1 woman dead. The mathematics of it haunted her dreams. She stopped sleeping. When she closed her eyes, she was back in that helicopter, watching the instruments die, feeling the spin, seeing Sarah's pale face beneath the water. The nightmares came every night. Sometimes she was drowning. Sometimes Sarah was calling to her, but Eleanor could not reach her. Sometimes the helicopter just fell and fell and fell, and she woke up before impact, gasping and covered in sweat. The RAF offered her counseling, therapy, medication. She went through the motions. She showed up to the appointments. She said the right things, but nothing helped. 3 months after the crash, Eleanor was cleared for flight duty. Physically, she was fine. A few bruises had healed. Her shoulder where she had wrenched it was back to normal. But when she walked onto the tarmac, when she saw a helicopter waiting there, something inside her broke. Her hands started shaking. Her chest tightened. She could not breathe. The world spun and tilted, and suddenly she was back in the North Sea, cold water closing over her head. "Captain Hart? Are you all right?" Someone was holding her arm, a junior officer. His face was concerned. "I'm fine," she lied. But she was not fine. She could not get into that helicopter. The thought of lifting off, of leaving the ground, filled her with a primal terror she had never experienced before. She called in sick that day, and the next day, and the day after that. The official diagnosis was post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. The psychologist explained it gently. Her brain had been through a trauma. It was trying to protect her by making her afraid of the thing that had hurt her. It was normal. It was treatable. But Eleanor did not want treatment. She did not want to talk about it. She did not want to process her feelings or work through her trauma. She wanted Sarah back. She wanted to undo that night. She wanted to never have flown into that storm. Since she could not have any of those things, she wanted to disappear. She took early retirement, 25 years of service. She was only 56 years old. Too young to retire, really. But the RAF understood, or at least they pretended to. They gave her a pension, a medal, a ceremony with speeches about her bravery and dedication. She stood there in her dress uniform, accepting the medal, and felt nothing but emptiness. Sarah's daughters were in the audience. They looked at Eleanor with something she could not identify. Not blame exactly, but maybe a question. Why you? Why did you survive when our mother did not? Eleanor had no answer for them. She had asked herself the same question every single day. Eleanor spent the next 6 months in a fog. She stayed in her flat in Portsmouth, where she had lived for 15 years. But the city felt wrong now. Too loud, too busy, too full of memories. She would walk past the naval base and see helicopters taking off. Her chest would tighten, and she would have to turn away. She would hear a news report about a rescue mission, and her hands would start shaking. Everything reminded her of what she had lost. Not just Sarah, not just her career, but herself, the person she had been. Eleanor Hart, RAF search and rescue pilot, was gone. In her place was this hollow woman who could not sleep, could not eat, could not function. Her sister Margaret came to visit. Margaret lived in London with her husband and 3 teenage sons. She took one look at Eleanor's flat, the unwashed dishes, the closed curtains, the pile of unopened mail, and made a decision. "You need to get out of here," Margaret said firmly. "This place is killing you." "I'm fine," Eleanor said automatically. It was what she always said. It was never true. "You're not fine." "Look at yourself, Elle. When was the last time you left this flat?" Eleanor could not remember. Days blended together into a gray sameness. Margaret sat down beside her on the couch and took her hand. "Listen to me. You need a fresh start, somewhere new, somewhere that doesn't remind you of everything that happened." "I can't run away from it," Eleanor said quietly. "I'm not asking you to run away. I'm asking you to give yourself a chance to heal, and you can't heal here." Over the next few weeks, Margaret helped Eleanor look at small towns and villages across England. Somewhere quiet, somewhere peaceful, somewhere she could just be. They found Willowbridge almost by accident. Margaret was scrolling through property listings and stopped at a photograph. A small stone cottage with a red door, a garden overgrown with roses, windows that looked out over rolling green hills. "What about this?" Margaret turned the laptop toward Eleanor. Eleanor studied the image. The cottage was in a village called Willowbridge in the Yorkshire Dales. Population, 843 people. 1 main street. 1 pub. 1 church. 1 post office. "It looks nice," Eleanor said carefully. "Nice?" Margaret laughed. "Elle, it looks perfect. When was the last time you lived somewhere with a garden? When was the last time you lived somewhere quiet enough to hear birds? Never, Eleanor realized. Her entire adult life had been military bases, city flats, noise and movement and constant activity. The thought of somewhere truly quiet was both terrifying and appealing. I don't know if I can afford it, Eleanor said, but it was a weak protest. Your pension is good. Plus, you have savings. And honestly, Elle, this place costs about half what your flat in Portsmouth does. Come on, let's at least go look at it. They drove up to Yorkshire on a Saturday in September. 3 years ago, almost to the day, since the crash. Eleanor had not left Portsmouth in all that time. The drive felt strange, foreign, like she was moving through a different world. The Yorkshire dales were beautiful in autumn. Rolling hills painted in shades of gold and amber. Stone walls dividing fields where sheep grazed peacefully. The sky was vast and open, clouds moving slowly across the blue. Eleanor's hands gripped the passenger seat as Margaret drove. So much open space, so much sky. It made her feel small, exposed. But also, strangely, it made her feel like she could breathe for the first time in 3 years. Willowbridge appeared as they crested a hill, a small village tucked into a valley, built around a stone bridge that crossed a narrow river. The buildings were old, constructed from local gray stone that seemed to grow out of the landscape itself. Oh, Elle, look at it, Margaret breathed. It's like something from a fairy tale. They drove slowly down the main street. There was the post office, a small building with a red postbox outside. There was the Swan Inn, a pub with hanging baskets of flowers. There was a church with a square tower, its bell visible in the opening at the top. There was a village green with benches and a war memorial. A few people were out and about. An elderly man walking a small dog. 2 women chatting outside the village shop. A teenager on a bicycle. They all looked up as the car passed, curious but not unfriendly. The estate agent met them at the cottage. It was at the edge of the village, down a narrow lane lined with hedgerows. The stone wall around the garden was crumbling in places, and the roses had indeed overgrown, climbing wild across the front of the house. It needs some work, the estate agent said apologetically. The previous owner was quite elderly. She didn't keep up with maintenance toward the end. But Eleanor was not listening. She was standing in the front garden, looking up at the cottage. It was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen, a sitting room. Simple, basic. But there was something about it, something that felt like it might be safe. Can I see inside? Eleanor asked. The interior smelled of dust and old wood. The furniture was dated, the wallpaper peeling in places. But the bones of the house were solid. The floors were level. The windows let in good light. The kitchen had a view of the hills beyond. Eleanor walked through each room slowly. She tried to imagine herself here, waking up in the bedroom upstairs, making tea in the kitchen, sitting in the garden watching the sunset. Could she be happy here? She did not know. But maybe that was not the right question. Maybe the question was, could she be peaceful here? Could she find some quiet in her mind? I'll take it, Eleanor said. Margaret looked at her in surprise. Don't you want to think about it? Look at other places? No, this is it. This is the one. The estate agent looked delighted. Wonderful. I'll draw up the paperwork. When would you like to complete the purchase? As soon as possible, Eleanor said.
6 weeks later, Eleanor Hart moved to Willowbridge. The first few weeks in Willowbridge were strange. Eleanor had grown accustomed to the noise of Portsmouth, traffic, sirens, people, the sounds of a city constantly in motion. Willowbridge was the opposite. At night, it was so quiet she could hear owls calling in the woods behind her cottage. During the day, the loudest sounds were sheep bleating in distant fields and the church bells marking the hours. It should have been peaceful. Instead, It was unsettling. In the silence, her thoughts were too loud, the memories too clear. She would lie awake at night, listening to nothing, and her mind would fill the quiet with sounds from that terrible night. The scream of failing engines, the crash of waves. Sarah's name called into the storm. Eleanor kept to herself at first. She unpacked her boxes slowly. She tackled the garden, pulling weeds and cutting back the overgrown roses. Physical work helped. When her body was tired, her mind was quieter. The villagers were curious about her, of course. Willowbridge was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. A new resident was major news, especially someone like Eleanor. A single woman in her late 50s, moving to the village alone. She could see the questions in their eyes when she passed them on the street. But Yorkshire people were also respectful of privacy. They greeted her warmly. "Morning, love." "Nice day, isn't it?" But they did not pry. Not directly, anyway. The first person to properly introduce herself was Mrs. Dorothy Ashworth, who lived in the cottage next door. Dorothy was in her 70s, a tiny woman with white hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She appeared at Eleanor's door on a Friday afternoon carrying a basket. "I've brought you some scones," Dorothy announced. "Fresh from the oven, and raspberry jam from my garden." "Oh, that's very kind, but you didn't have to—" Eleanor began. "Nonsense. It's tradition. New neighbor gets scones. That's the way it's always been done. I'm Dorothy Ashworth. I've lived here 43 years. You must be Miss Hart." Mrs. Hart, actually, though I'm widowed. It was a lie, but easier than explaining. "Please, call me Eleanor." Eleanor. Lovely name. Come from the Greek, you know. Means bright light. Are you settling in all right? Cottage needs a bit of work, I expect. Old Mrs. Pemberton, God rest her soul, she let things slide in her final years. Dorothy walked into the cottage without waiting for an invitation. She moved through the rooms with the confidence of someone who had probably known the previous owner well. "Kitchen's nice. Good light. You'll want to replace that boiler, though. It's ancient. And these windows, they're original, which is charming, but they leak something terrible in winter. I can give you the name of a good handyman. Tom Fletcher. Lives just up the road. Honest worker, fair prices." Eleanor found herself smiling despite herself. Dorothy's brisk efficiency was oddly comforting. "Thank you. I appreciate that. Now then," Dorothy turned to face her directly, "I won't pry into why you've come to Willowbridge. Everyone has their reasons for wanting a quiet life. But if you need anything at all, you just knock on my door. I'm always home. And I mean that, Eleanor. Day or night." There was something in Dorothy's eyes. Understanding. Like she recognized a fellow soul who had seen hard times. "Thank you," Eleanor said quietly. "That means a lot." After Dorothy left, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table and ate one of the scones. It was delicious. Light and buttery with just the right amount of sweetness. Through the window, she could see the hills turning golden in the late afternoon sun. Maybe, she thought, maybe this could work. Eleanor had not planned to get a job. Her pension was adequate for her simple lifestyle. But after a few months in Willowbridge, the long empty days started to weigh on her. She needed structure, purpose, something to fill the hours. The answer came unexpectedly. She was in the village shop one morning when she overheard a conversation. "It's terrible timing, really," said Mrs. Patel, who ran the shop. "Poor Judith. Her mother's taken a bad fall. She needs to move to Birmingham to care for her." "Who's Judith?" Eleanor asked. "Judith Collins. She runs the post office. Been there 15 years. Absolute treasure. But family comes first, of course. The problem is, she needs to leave in 3 weeks, and we haven't found a replacement yet." Eleanor felt something stir inside her. Not quite excitement, but interest. A small spark of something that might have been purpose. "What does the job involve?" she asked. Mrs. Patel looked at her with sudden interest. Are you thinking of applying? Maybe. I've never worked in a post office before, but I'm organized and good with people. That was not entirely true. Eleanor used to be good with people. Before. Now she preferred solitude. But she could learn to be good with people again, couldn't she? Well, it's not complicated, Mrs. Patel said. Selling stamps, processing packages, handling some basic banking services. The hours are 9 to 5, Monday to Saturday. It's part-time, really, since we close for lunch. The pay's not brilliant, but it's steady. Could you give me Judith's contact information? I'd like to talk to her about it. 2 weeks later, Eleanor started training at the Willowbridge post office. Judith Collins was a cheerful woman in her 40s with a seemingly endless supply of patience. She spent 2 weeks teaching Eleanor the systems, the procedures, the quirks of the job. The computer system's a bit old, Judith explained, but once you get the hang of it, it's quite straightforward. Most of your customers will be regulars. They'll come in at the same time each week for their pension or to post parcels. You'll get to know them quickly. What about difficult customers? Eleanor asked. Judith laughed. Oh, we have a few. Old Mr. Greaves will complain about the price of stamps every single time, even though it's not something we control. Mrs. Wilson sometimes tries to post things that aren't properly packaged. You have to be firm with her. And Tommy Bradley's always losing his bank card, bless him. But overall, they're a lovely bunch. They'll appreciate having someone reliable behind the counter. The work was indeed straightforward, methodical. No surprises, no split-second decisions, no life-or-death situations. Just stamps and parcels, and polite conversation about the weather. It was perfect. Eleanor's first day alone in the post office was nerve-wracking. She arrived 20 minutes early, double-checking that she had everything ready. The cash drawer was correct. The scales were calibrated. The computer was booted up and logged in. At 9 o'clock exactly, she unlocked the door. Her first customer was Dorothy. Morning, Eleanor. Settling in all right? Morning, Dorothy. Yes, thank you. What can I help you with today? Just posting a birthday card to my granddaughter in Leeds. First class, please. Eleanor processed the transaction carefully, weighing the envelope, printing the postage, accepting payment. Her hands were steady. Her voice was calm. There you go. It should arrive tomorrow. Lovely. You're a natural at this already. As Dorothy left, Eleanor felt something unfamiliar. A small glow of accomplishment. She had done her job correctly. It was simple, yes, but she had done it without panic, without fear, without her hands shaking. It was a start. Over the following weeks and months, Eleanor settled into the rhythm of post office life. The work was repetitive, but that was comforting. She learned the names of the regular customers. She heard their stories. Bits and pieces of village life filtered through her counter. She learned that Mr. Greaves had been a teacher for 40 years and still taught music lessons from his cottage. That Mrs. Wilson's daughter had just had twins. That Tommy Bradley was training to be a carpenter, but had dyslexia and struggled with paperwork. That the Patel family had owned the village shop for 3 generations. The village began to feel less foreign. The faces became familiar. When she walked down the main street, people greeted her by name. Morning, Eleanor. Lovely weather, Eleanor. See you tomorrow, Eleanor. She was becoming part of the community. It was strange, unsettling in some ways. For so long she had been defined by her work with the RAF, by being a pilot, by being part of something larger and more important. Now she was just Eleanor Hart, the woman who ran the post office in a tiny Yorkshire village, and slowly, very slowly, she was learning that maybe that was enough. 3 years passed. Eleanor's cottage transformed from a neglected property into a comfortable home. Tom Fletcher, the handyman Dorothy had recommended, helped replace the old boiler and repair the leaking windows. Eleanor painted the walls in soft colors, cream and pale blue and gentle green. She bought simple furniture from charity shops and car boot sales. Nothing fancy, nothing that reminded her of her old life, The garden became her sanctuary. She spent hours pruning the roses, planting vegetables, creating flower beds. Her hands learned to be gentle with fragile stems and delicate petals. It was different from flying. Flying had required strength, precision, control. Gardening required patience, care, nurturing. Both had their own kind of grace. The nightmares still came, but less frequently. Some weeks she would sleep through the night, waking naturally to birdsong instead of gasping awake from dreams of drowning. The therapist she saw monthly in York told her this was progress. Healing was not linear. There would be good weeks and bad weeks. The important thing was that the trajectory was upward, even if it was gradual. Eleanor still could not look at helicopters. She still changed the channel when news reports showed aerial rescue footage. She still felt her chest tighten when planes flew overhead. But these reactions were manageable now. They did not consume her entire day. The post office job proved to be exactly what she needed. The interactions with customers were brief but pleasant. She was useful without being essential, responsible without carrying life or death weight. If she made a mistake, it meant someone's letter arrived late, not that someone died. She formed quiet friendships, not deep ones, not the kind where she shared her past or her fears, but genuine connections nonetheless. Dorothy became a regular companion. They had tea together most Sunday afternoons. Dorothy was a widow herself. Her husband had died of cancer 12 years earlier. She understood grief, though she did not push Eleanor to talk about hers. "Some things are too heavy to share," Dorothy said once, "and that's all right. You carry what you can carry. When it gets lighter, if it gets lighter, then you can put it down. But there's no rush." Tom Fletcher became another friend of sorts. He was in his early 30s, a tall man with carpenter's hands and an easy smile. He had grown up in Willowbridge, left for university in Manchester to study engineering, and returned 5 years ago to help care for his aging parents. "I thought I'd hate coming back," Tom told Eleanor once while fixing a loose board on her fence. "I thought village life would feel small and boring after the city. But you know what? There's something to be said for knowing your neighbors, for being part of a community. My parents don't need me as much now, but I've stayed anyway. Turns out this is home." Eleanor understood that. Willowbridge was becoming home for her, too. She joined the village book club, though she rarely spoke during discussions. She attended the church summer fete, helping run the tombola stall. She volunteered at the village hall once a month for the community lunch, serving meals to elderly residents. These were small things, simple things, but they mattered. On the 3rd anniversary of the crash, Eleanor did something she had been avoiding. She wrote a letter to Sarah's daughters. It took her 6 hours to write. 6 hours and a dozen false starts. What could she possibly say? How could she explain? Oh, in the end, she kept it simple. "Dear Emma and Lily, I think about your mother every day. She was the bravest person I ever knew, and the best friend I ever had. I know that nothing I say can make up for her loss, and I will always carry the weight of that night. But I wanted you to know that she loved you both more than anything in the world. You were the first thing she talked about in the morning, and the last thing she mentioned before we landed from any mission. She had pictures of you both in her helmet bag, and she looked at them before every flight for luck. Your mother saved hundreds of lives during her career. She died doing what she believed in, helping people in desperate need. I know that doesn't make it easier. I know you would rather have her with you than have her be a hero. But I hope, someday, it might bring you some small comfort to know how much good she brought into the world. I'm sorry. I will always be sorry. But I hope you are both well, and I hope you know that your mother's memory lives on in the hearts of everyone who knew her. With love and sorrow, Eleanor." She posted the letter before she could change her mind. She never received a response, and she did not expect one. But writing it helped. It felt like she had finally said goodbye. Life in Willowbridge continued its gentle pace. Seasons turned. The village prepared for Christmas, then spring, then summer. Eleanor marked time by the changes in her garden. First crocuses, then daffodils, then roses in full bloom, then autumn colors, then bare branches waiting for spring again. She was not happy exactly, but she was peaceful, and for now, that was enough, until the day the rain came. The weather had been strange all week, unseasonably warm for late March, with heavy humidity that made the air feel thick and oppressive. The farmers talked about it in the pub, shaking their heads. "Feels like storm weather," old Mr. Greaves said one afternoon in the post office. "Mark my words, we're in for it." Eleanor looked out the window at the gray sky. Clouds were piling up over the hills, dark and heavy. "Do we get bad storms here?" "Not often," Mr. Greaves replied, "but when we do, they're proper ones. I remember back in '94, the Willowbridge River flooded. Water came right up to the bridge, it did. Thought the whole thing might wash away." Eleanor felt an old familiar tingle at the base of her spine. Weather sense. Every pilot developed it. The ability to read the atmosphere, to sense when conditions were turning dangerous. "How high did the water get?" she asked. "High enough to close the road for 2 days. Few cottages down by the river took on water. Council's been meaning to improve the flood defenses for years, but you know how these things go. Never enough money in the budget." That evening, Eleanor checked the weather forecast on her laptop. The news was concerning. A large low-pressure system was moving in from the Atlantic. Heavy rainfall predicted. Possible flooding in low-lying areas. Weather warnings had been issued. She looked out her window toward the village. The river ran through the center of Willowbridge, crossed by the old stone bridge that gave the village its name. Most of the buildings were well above the water level, but there were a few properties right on the riverbank. Old cottages and a converted mill building that had been turned into apartments. Eleanor felt uneasy, but told herself it was nothing to worry about. Weather forecasts were often wrong, and even if it did rain heavily, surely the village had learned from past floods. Surely precautions had been taken. She went to bed early, listening to the wind beginning to pick up outside. Eleanor woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of rain hammering on her roof. Not normal rain. This was a deluge, water falling in sheets so thick it sounded like being under a waterfall. She got out of bed and looked out the window. The darkness was absolute except for when lightning flashed, illuminating the garden in stark white bursts. The roses were bent nearly horizontal by the wind. Water was pooling on the lawn. She checked her phone. Flood warnings, severe weather alerts, a message from the village emergency group, something Tom had set up a year ago, just in case. Heavy rainfall continuing. Monitor the river level. Possible evacuation of riverside properties if water continues to rise. Eleanor felt her chest tighten. That old familiar fear trying to creep in. Storm, emergency, danger. No, she told herself firmly. This is not that. This is just rain. You are safe in your cottage. This is not the North Sea. But sleep was impossible. She made tea and sat in her kitchen, watching the storm rage outside. The hours crawled past. 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. At 7, still dark outside because of the thick clouds, Eleanor's phone rang. It was Tom. "Eleanor, sorry to call so early. Are you all right?" "I'm fine. My cottage is on high ground. What's happening?" "The river's rising faster than anyone expected. It's already overflowed the banks in some places. We're organizing volunteers to help move people from the lower cottages. Can you come to the village hall?"
Eleanor's first instinct was to say no, to stay safe in her cottage. But she thought of Dorothy, of Mrs. Patel, of all the people she had come to know over 3 years. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. She dressed quickly. Waterproof jacket, Wellington boots, warm layers underneath. She grabbed a torch and her phone and headed out into the storm. The rain was extraordinary. Within seconds, she was soaked despite her waterproofs. The wind tore at her jacket, and she had to lean into it to make progress. The lane from her cottage to the village was already running with water, streams of it rushing downhill toward the river. The village hall was lit up like a beacon in the darkness. Eleanor pushed through the door to find it full of people. Villagers in wet clothes, some wrapping blankets around themselves, children looking scared, elderly residents being helped to chairs. Tom was in the center of it all, organizing with calm efficiency. Eleanor! Thank God. Can you help register everyone who comes in? We need to keep track of who's been evacuated and who might still be in danger. Of course. Eleanor set herself up at a table with a clipboard and pen. Over the next hour, a steady stream of people came through the door. The residents of Riverside Cottages, the family from the Mill Apartments, the Johnsons whose garden backed onto the river. Everyone had the same story. The water had risen so fast. 1 minute the river was high but contained. The next minute it was spilling over the banks, flowing through gardens, creeping toward doors. I've never seen anything like it, Mrs. Johnson said, her voice shaking. 40 years we've lived there, and I've never seen it rise this fast. By 9 a.m., most of the vulnerable properties had been evacuated. The village hall looked like a refugee center. The church had opened as well, taking in more people. Mrs. Patel and Dorothy were organizing food and hot drinks. Everything seemed under control. And then Tom's radio crackled to life. Emergency services frequency. Eleanor was standing close enough to hear. All units, we have a situation at Oak Mill Apartments. 4 children trapped on the roof. Repeat, 4 children trapped. Water has cut off access. Request immediate assistance. Eleanor felt the world tilt. Children. Trapped. The words echoed in her head with terrible familiarity. Tom was already moving, speaking into the radio. This is Tom Fletcher, Willowbridge Emergency Coordinator. What's the status of emergency services? The response came back, crackling with static. Fire and rescue are responding to multiple incidents across the region. Earliest response time to your location is 90 minutes. Can you confirm the children are in immediate danger? Tom ran to the window. Even from the village hall, they could see Oak Mill in the distance, the old building right on the riverbank. The top floor had been converted into apartments, and on the roof, barely visible through the rain, were small figures, children. They're on the roof, Tom said into the radio. Building is surrounded by water. Current looks strong. Yes, they are in immediate danger. Eleanor's legs were moving before her brain caught up. She was at the window, pressing her face to the glass, trying to see. 4 children, on a roof, water rising, storm raging. 90 minutes. In 90 minutes, the building could collapse. The children could fall. The water could rise higher than the roof. We have to do something, Eleanor said. Tom turned to her, his face drawn. What can we do? We don't have rescue equipment. The current's too strong to wade through. We can't reach them. Eleanor's mind was racing. This was exactly what she had been trained to do for 25 years. Assess situations, find solutions, execute rescues. But she had no helicopter, no winch, no crew. What she had was knowledge, experience, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. Tom, you fly drones, don't you? Eleanor asked suddenly. Tom looked confused. What? Yes, I have a drone. For surveying work. Why? Can it carry weight? It's a heavy lift model, so yes, it can carry up to 5 kilograms. But I don't see how. Get it, now. And get me rope, carabiners, life jackets if you have them. Anything that floats. Eleanor? What are you thinking? She turned to face him, and for the first time in 3 years, something clicked back into place inside her. Purpose. Mission. The part of her that had been dormant, suddenly roaring back to life. I'm thinking I'm going to save those children. They gathered in the corner of the village hall. Tom, Eleanor, Dorothy, Mrs. Patel, and James Wilson, who was a volunteer with the local fire service. "This is insane," James said, but there was no heat in his words. "You want to use a drone to deliver rescue equipment to children trapped on a roof in the middle of a storm?" "Yes," Eleanor said simply. "That's not going to work. The wind conditions are impossible. The rain will interfere with visibility. And even if you manage to fly the drone, what then? They're children. The youngest is probably 7 or 8 years old. They can't execute a technical rescue." "They don't have to execute it," Eleanor replied. "They just have to hold on. We send them life jackets first, then rope tied to something secure. They put on the life jackets and tie themselves to the rope. Then they wait for emergency services. The drone might not have enough battery life for multiple trips," Tom said. "And if it crashes in this weather—" "I know the risks," Eleanor interrupted. Her voice was calm, steady. This was familiar territory. "But right now, those children have no safety equipment. If the building collapses or the water rises, they have no chance. With life jackets and rope, they at least have something. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing." Tom studied her face. "You've done rescues before, haven't you?" Eleanor hesitated. She had kept her past secret for 3 years, but this was not the time for secrets. "Yes, I was a pilot. Search and rescue, 25 years. I've been in situations like this before. Not exactly like this, but similar." She saw the surprise on their faces. Quiet Eleanor from the post office was a military pilot. It did not fit with what they knew of her. "Why didn't you tell us?" Dorothy asked softly. "Because I wanted to forget," Eleanor said honestly. "I had a traumatic experience. I couldn't fly anymore. I came here to escape that part of my life. But right now, those children need someone with experience, and I'm the only one here who has it." Tom made a decision. "All right. My workshop is 5 minutes away. I have the drone there, and I have rope and carabiners from my climbing gear. What else do we need?" "Life jackets. Small sizes if possible. Something that will definitely keep a child afloat." Mrs. Patel spoke up. "The scout group has life jackets for the canoeing trips. They're stored in the church hall basement. Get them. Tom, get your equipment. We need to move fast." Everyone scattered to their tasks. Eleanor pulled out her phone and opened the weather app. Wind speed, 32 miles per hour, gusting to 45. Rain, heavy, continuous. Visibility, poor. She had flown helicopters in worse conditions, but helicopters were powerful machines designed for difficult weather. A recreational drone was different, more fragile, more vulnerable. But it was what they had. Tom returned first, carrying a large case. He opened it to reveal the drone, a serious piece of equipment, not a toy. 6 rotors, professional-grade camera, carry basket underneath. "This is what I use for surveying," Tom explained. "I photograph buildings and structures from the air for construction projects. It's stable in moderate wind, but I've never flown it in conditions like this." "You're not going to," Eleanor said. "I am." Tom started to protest, but Dorothy cut him off. "Tom, love, let the experienced pilot handle this part. You help her with the equipment." Mrs. Patel arrived with an armful of small life jackets, bright orange, designed for children. Eleanor inspected them quickly. Good condition, proper flotation. They would work. "We need to pack the life jackets into the carry basket," Eleanor said. "As compact as possible. We'll do multiple trips. First trip, 4 life jackets. Second trip, rope and carabiners, instructions on what to do." "Instructions?" James asked. Eleanor grabbed a piece of paper and started writing in large, clear letters. "Put on life jackets. Tie rope around waist. Tight tie other end to. Chimney stay where you are, help is coming." "Simple," she said. Nothing complicated. Even young children can understand this. Tom was packing the life jackets into the drone's carry basket. They fit barely, compressed into a tight bundle. The basket releases remotely, Tom explained. You press this button, and it drops the payload. But Eleanor, the accuracy required to drop this onto a specific point on a roof, in these wind conditions, with limited visibility. I know, Eleanor said. She felt strangely calm. The fear that had haunted her for 3 years was gone. In its place was focus, clarity. This was what she had trained to do. This was who she was. Let's go, she said. They set up position as close to Oak Mill as they could safely get. The village green was partially flooded, water lapping at the war memorial, but there was a slight rise near the church that was still dry. Tom set up the drone there while Eleanor studied the situation. Oak Mill was 200 meters away, a 3-story stone building right on the riverbank. The water had surrounded it completely, flowing fast and dark, full of debris. The building was old, and Eleanor could see cracks in the stonework. How long before it gave way? On the roof, she could just make out 4 small figures. Children. They were huddled together near the chimney, trying to shelter from the rain. How long had they been there? They must be terrified. Eleanor, Tom said. The controller. Do you know how to use it? Eleanor took the handheld controller. It was more complex than she had expected. 2 joysticks, multiple buttons, a small screen showing the camera feed. Talk me through the basics, she said. Tom pointed quickly. Left stick controls altitude and rotation. Right stick controls forward, backward, and lateral movement. This button activates the camera. This button releases the cargo basket. The screen shows you what the camera sees, and these indicators show battery life, speed, altitude, and signal strength. Eleanor's hands wrapped around the controller. Muscle memory kicked in. This was different from a helicopter, but the principles were the same. Lift, direction, control, balance. How much battery life? Fully charged, about 25 minutes of flight time, but less in these wind conditions. The motors have to work harder to maintain stability. 25 minutes. She had to make every second count. Starting the rotors, Tom said. The drone whirred to life, its 6 propellers spinning up to speed. Eleanor felt her heart rate increase, not panic, adrenaline, the good kind, the kind that sharpened focus. She pushed the left stick up gently. The drone lifted smoothly off the ground. 1 meter, 2 meters, 5 meters. The wind caught it immediately, trying to push it sideways. Eleanor compensated instinctively, her fingers making tiny adjustments to keep it stable. Good, Tom breathed. That's good. You're a natural at this. Eleanor did not respond. She was watching the screen, watching the camera feed. The village spread out below. She pushed the right stick forward, and the drone began moving toward Oak Mill. The wind was fierce. Every few seconds, a gust would hit, and the drone would lurch. But Eleanor was ready for it. She had flown helicopters through storms. She understood how weather moved, how to anticipate gusts, how to read the patterns. The drone moved forward steadily. 150 meters to target. 100 meters, 75 meters. The children on the roof came into view on the camera. Eleanor could see their faces now. 3 girls and a boy. The oldest, maybe 11 or 12. The youngest, perhaps 7. They were soaked, shivering, clinging to each other. When they saw the drone approaching, they looked up in confusion. One of the older girls stood, waving her arms. They see me, Eleanor said. You're doing great, Tom encouraged. Just a bit further. Eleanor brought the drone directly over the roof. The wind was stronger here, accelerated by the building itself. She fought to hold position, making constant tiny adjustments. The cargo basket swung wildly beneath the drone. "I'm going to drop the life jackets," Eleanor said. "Tell them to catch them." James was already on his phone calling the emergency services, who had been in contact with the children. "They're ready," he said. Eleanor watched the screen carefully. She needed to time this perfectly. Too high and the basket might blow away. Too low and it might hit one of the children. She brought the drone down to 3 meters above the roof. The children backed away from the chimney, arms outstretched. Eleanor pressed the release button. The cargo basket opened, and the bundle of life jackets fell. It dropped straight down, and then the wind caught it, pushing it sideways. Eleanor's heart jumped. No. But the oldest girl was fast. She lunged sideways and caught the bundle before it could blow off the roof. "Yes," Tom shouted. "She got it." Through the camera, Eleanor watched the girl quickly distribute the life jackets to the other children. They struggled to put them on with cold, shaking hands, but they managed. 4 children, 4 bright orange life jackets. Step 1 complete. "Bringing the drone back," Eleanor said. "We need to load the rope and instructions." She flew the drone back to their position. Her hands were steady, but she could feel the strain. Flying in these conditions took intense concentration. Every moment required active correction, active adjustment. Tom quickly attached the rope and instructions to the cargo basket. The rope was thin but strong, climbing rope, rated for far more weight than children needed. He tied one end to a carabiner and coiled the rest into the basket along with 3 more carabiners and the instruction sheet in a waterproof bag. "Ready," Tom said. Eleanor launched again. The second trip was harder. The wind had increased. The rain was falling heavier. The drone struggled against the conditions, its motors whining with effort. "Battery at 60%, Tom warned. "You're using power faster because of the wind resistance." Eleanor knew. She could feel it in the way the drone responded. Sluggish, working hard. She pushed forward anyway, back over Oak Mill. The children were still there, still safe, now wearing life jackets. That was something. Eleanor brought the drone into position again. This time she went lower, just 2 meters above the roof. She needed accuracy for this drop. The rope had to land where the children could reach it. Release. The rope fell, uncoiling as it dropped. The carabiners clinked against the roof tiles. The oldest girl grabbed the rope immediately. Eleanor watched through the camera as the girl opened the waterproof bag and read the instructions. She nodded, understanding. She showed the paper to the other children. Working together, the 4 of them tied the rope around each of their waists, using the carabiners to link them together. Then they tied the other end around the chimney, wrapping it multiple times and securing it tightly. It was not a professional rescue setup, but it was something. If the roof gave way, if the water rose, they would not be immediately swept away. They would have a chance. "They're secured," James said into his phone, listening to the emergency services. "Fire and rescue is 45 minutes out. They're asking if the children can hold on that long." Eleanor looked at the building. Water was lapping at the second-floor windows now. The stone walls were solid, but the old mortar between the stones was crumbling in places. How much longer? "Tell them we'll stay here and monitor," Eleanor said. "If the situation deteriorates, we'll figure something out." She brought the drone back one more time. The battery was at 30%. One more flight, maybe 2 if they needed them. But for now, the children were as safe as Eleanor could make them. They had flotation. They had security. They had hope. She landed the drone and sagged slightly, the adrenaline beginning to ebb. Her hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from the sustained concentration. Tom put a hand on her shoulder. "That was incredible. I've never seen anyone fly like that in these conditions." Dorothy wrapped a blanket around Eleanor's shoulders. You did good, love. You saved those children. They're not saved yet, Eleanor said. Not until rescue arrives and gets them off that roof safely. But she allowed herself a small moment of relief. She had done it. She had flown again. Not a helicopter, but close enough. And she had not frozen. She had not panicked. She had done what needed to be done. Maybe, just maybe, she was not as broken as she thought. The next 45 minutes were the longest of Eleanor's life. They stood in the rain, watching Oak Mill, watching the children on the roof. The water continued to rise, inch by inch. The building groaned and creaked, old stone and timber protesting the strain. More villagers gathered despite the weather. Word had spread about what Eleanor had done. People brought flasks of tea, blankets, words of encouragement. The entire community was holding its breath, waiting, hoping. Why were children alone in the building? Eleanor asked. They weren't supposed to be, Mrs. Patel explained. The Miller family lives on the second floor. Their children, 3 girls. The 4th child is their neighbor's son, visiting for the day. When the evacuation order came, the parents sent the children upstairs to get their coats and important items. But the water rose so fast. By the time the parents realized, the stairs were flooded. The children went to the roof because it was the only way up and out. Eleanor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. Minutes. That's all it took. Minutes for a situation to go from safe to life-threatening. The parents? She asked. They evacuated safely. They're at the village hall, frantic with worry. Someone should tell them their children are secure and wearing life jackets. That might help. Dorothy immediately pulled out her phone to make the call. Tom was monitoring the drone battery, keeping it ready in case another flight was needed. If the building starts to collapse, what's the plan? He asked quietly. Eleanor had been thinking about that. If we see cracks spreading or the walls starting to lean, we fly over and tell them to move to the highest point of the roof and hold on tight. The life jackets will keep them afloat. The rope will keep them together. But I won't lie, Tom. If that building comes down, it's going to be very dangerous. I know. Tom's face was grim. But you've given them a chance they didn't have before. That matters. Time crawled. Eleanor kept her eyes on the building, looking for any sign of structural failure. The water was at the second-floor windows now, pressing against the glass. How much longer before it breached the doors, filled the interior, added weight and pressure to walls never designed to withstand flooding? 30 minutes. The children were still visible on the roof, huddled together, tied securely. 20 minutes. The rain began to ease slightly, not stopping, but less violent. The wind dropped too. Small mercies. 10 minutes. In the distance, Eleanor heard sirens, fire engines, rescue vehicles. Help was coming. 5 minutes. The emergency vehicles appeared at the edge of the floodwater. Large trucks with high clearance, firefighters in waterproof gear, rescue equipment being unloaded. Eleanor felt something loosen in her chest. They were going to make it. The children were going to be all right. The fire brigade worked with impressive efficiency. They deployed an inflatable rescue boat, powerful enough to navigate the current. 2 firefighters in the boat, one operating the motor, one ready to secure the children. The boat moved through the water steadily, approaching Oak Mill. Eleanor watched through binoculars that someone had handed her. The oldest girl on the roof saw the boat and stood, waving. The other children waved too, their small arms semaphoring relief and hope. The boat reached the building. One firefighter climbed onto a lower section of roof and then carefully up to where the children were. Eleanor could see him talking to them, reassuring them, checking their life jackets. He untied them from the chimney one by one and helped them down to where his partner waited. First child into the boat, second child, third child, fourth child. All four safely aboard. The boat turned and began the journey back to dry land. The crowd that had gathered erupted in cheers. Eleanor felt tears mixing with the rain on her face. Relief, gratitude, something else she could not quite name. The children reached safety. They were wrapped in thermal blankets, checked by paramedics, reunited with their frantic parents. Eleanor watched from a distance as the Miller family embraced, crying, laughing, all talking at once. The fire chief, a solid man in his 50s with a weather-beaten face, approached Eleanor. "You're the one who flew the drone?" he asked. "Yes." "That was exceptional work. Those life jackets and that rope, you potentially saved 4 lives today. In my 20 years of service, I've never seen a civilian response like that." "I'm just glad they're safe," Eleanor said. "I'd like to get your details for our report." "What's your name and background?" Eleanor hesitated. Then, Eleanor Hart, former RAF Search and Rescue, retired. Understanding crossed the fire chief's face. "Ah, that explains the skill level. Well, Captain Hart, just Eleanor, please." "Eleanor, then. You should be very proud of what you did today." He moved away to coordinate the rest of the rescue operation. There were still people needing help, still properties to check, still work to do. Eleanor felt suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was gone, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. She had flown for the first time in 3 years. She had done rescue work for the first time since Sarah died, and she had not fallen apart. Dorothy appeared at her elbow. "Come on, love. Let's get you home. You're soaked through, and you look like you're about to collapse." "I'm fine," Eleanor said automatically. "No, you're not." "You're in shock. That was an incredible thing you did, but your body's going to process it now. Come on, my cottage is closer. Hot bath, hot tea, and a lie down." Eleanor did not have the energy to argue. She let Dorothy lead her away from the crowd, away from the activity, back toward the quiet streets of Upper Willowbridge. But as they walked, Eleanor looked back once at Oak Mill. 4 children who had woken up this morning not knowing their lives would be in danger. 4 children who were safe now, in large part because of her. 3 years ago, Eleanor had believed she would never save anyone again. She had believed that part of her life was over. She had been wrong. Eleanor slept for 12 hours straight, a deep, dreamless sleep of complete exhaustion. When she woke, it was the following morning. The storm had passed. Pale sunlight streamed through Dorothy's guest room window. She lay still for a moment, taking inventory. Her body ached. Her muscles were sore from the tension of flying the drone. Her head felt fuzzy. But underneath it all, there was something else. Something she had not felt in 3 years. Peace. Not the forced quiet of avoidance. Not the desperate silence of someone hiding from their past. But genuine peace. The kind that came from facing something difficult and surviving it. She got up slowly and found her way downstairs. Dorothy was in the kitchen, humming while she prepared breakfast. "Morning, sleepyhead. How do you feel?" "Like I was hit by a truck," Eleanor said honestly. "But also, okay. Better than okay, actually." "Good. You did an amazing thing yesterday. The whole village is talking about it. Actually, the whole region is talking about it. You're famous." "What?" Dorothy handed her a tablet showing a news website. The headline read, "Retired RAF pilot saves 4 children using drone in dramatic flood rescue." Eleanor's breath caught. There was a photograph. Someone had taken a picture of her flying the drone, her face set in concentration, rain streaming down. The article described the rescue in detail, quoted the fire chief praising her skill, and included information about her background as a search and rescue pilot. "How did they find out all this?" Eleanor asked. Tom gave them the basic facts. The fire brigade filled in the details. And to be honest, love, you can't expect to do something that heroic and remain anonymous. This is news. Good news. The kind people want to hear about. Eleanor scrolled through the article, her emotions complicated. Part of her cringed at the attention. She had come to Willowbridge to escape notice, to be nobody. But another part, a part that had been silent for 3 years, felt a small glow of pride. She had done good work. She had saved lives. That mattered. "There's more," Dorothy said gently. "You've had phone calls. The local news wants to interview you. The regional council wants to thank you officially, and—" She paused. "Sarah Mitchell's daughters called. They want to talk to you." Eleanor's hands trembled slightly. Emma and Lily, the girls she had sent a letter to on the anniversary of their mother's death, the girls who had never responded. What did they say? Just that they'd heard about the rescue. "They'd like to speak with you when you're ready. No pressure. Here's the number." Dorothy handed her a piece of paper with a phone number written in careful script. Eleanor stared at it for a long moment. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. "That's all right. It's your choice." "But Eleanor, those girls reached out. That means something. Maybe it's time." Eleanor put the paper in her pocket and changed the subject. "I should go home. Check on my cottage. See what damage the storm did."
Your cottage is fine. I checked on it yesterday evening. But yes, you should go home. Get back to normal. Or, as normal as life gets when you're the talk of the town. Eleanor managed a weak smile. I never wanted to be the talk of the town. Too bad. You are. Might as well embrace it. The next few days were overwhelming. Eleanor tried to return to work at the post office, but customers kept stopping to shake her hand, to thank her, to tell her what a hero she was. "I'm not a hero," she said repeatedly. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Mr. Greaves said firmly. "What you did required specialized skills and extraordinary courage. Don't diminish it." The local newspaper ran a feature story. The regional television news did a segment. Eleanor reluctantly agreed to a brief interview, speaking carefully about the rescue, deflecting questions about her past. But the attention that affected her most came from unexpected places. Other pilots from her old RAF unit reached out. Some she had not heard from in 3 years, since the accident. They sent messages of support and pride. Saw the news. Classic Eleanor. Always finding a way to save people. "You might have left the uniform behind, but you're still one of us. Sarah would be so proud of you." That last message, from her old commanding officer, made Eleanor cry. Sarah would be proud. The thought hurt and healed at the same time. Tom came by her cottage one evening, carrying a bottle of wine and a sheepish expression. "I hope you don't mind that I told the press about your background," he said. "I thought it was important context for understanding how you pulled off that rescue." "It's all right," Eleanor said, and meant it. "I suppose I can't hide forever." They sat in her garden, watching the sunset paint the hills gold and orange. The floodwaters had receded, leaving mud and debris, but no permanent damage to most of the village. "You know," Tom said carefully, "I've been thinking about what happened, about how we had no proper emergency response capabilities. If you hadn't been here, those children might have died." "Emergency services would have reached them eventually," Eleanor said. "Maybe. Or maybe not. The point is, we were lucky you were here. But we shouldn't rely on luck. I've been talking to the village council. We want to establish a proper volunteer emergency response team. Basic training, some equipment, nothing fancy, but enough to handle situations until professional help arrives." "That sounds like a good idea. Would you help train them? Basic crisis management, weather assessment, rescue protocols? I know it's asking a lot. especially given your history. But Eleanor, you have knowledge that could save lives. Eleanor considered this. A few weeks ago, the idea would have been impossible. Teaching rescue techniques would mean confronting her past every single day. But something had shifted. Flying that drone, executing that rescue, had proven to herself that she was not broken. The skills were still there. The instincts were still sharp. "Yes," she said. "I'll help." Tom looked surprised, then delighted. "Really? That's fantastic. The first meeting is next Thursday at the village hall. I'll send you the details." After Tom left, Eleanor sat in the garden until darkness fell. The spring air was cool but pleasant. Stars appeared one by one in the clear sky overhead. No clouds, no storms, just peace. She thought about Sarah, about the crash, about the 3 years she had spent hiding from who she was, and she thought about 4 children, safe at home with their families because she had found the courage to act. Maybe, she thought, it was time to stop running from her past. Not to return to it fully. She would never fly professionally again, never put on a uniform again, but to integrate it, to accept that Eleanor Hart, RAF pilot, and Eleanor Hart, village post office worker, were both parts of the same person. She did not have to choose one or the other. She could be both. In late September, on the 4th anniversary of the crash, Eleanor did something she had never done before. She went to Sarah's grave. She had not attended the funeral. She had been too broken then, too consumed by guilt. But now, 4 years later, she made the journey to the cemetery in Hampshire where Sarah was buried. It was a beautiful spot. Rolling green hills, old oak trees, stones weathered by time. Sarah's grave was marked by a simple headstone with her name, her dates, and the words, "Beloved mother, wife, and friend, always saving lives." Eleanor laid flowers at the base of the stone. Yellow roses, Sarah's favorites. "Hi, Sarah," she said quietly. "I'm sorry it took me so long to visit. I'm sorry for so many things." The wind rustled through the oak trees, carrying the scent of autumn leaves. "I finally did it. I flew again. Sort of. It was a drone, not a helicopter, but it felt the same. The focus, the precision, the purpose. And I saved 4 children. I think you would have been proud of that." Eleanor sat down on the grass beside the grave, not caring if it was disrespectful or odd. "I met your daughters, Emma and Lily. They're amazing, Sarah. So strong and smart and kind. They have your courage. Emma's studying medicine. Lily wants to join the Coast Guard. They're going to help people just like you did." She wiped away tears, not trying to hide them. "I'm living in a tiny village now. I work at the post office. Can you imagine? Me, selling stamps and processing parcels. But you know what? It's good. It's peaceful. I'm teaching emergency response training, helping the community prepare for disasters. I have friends. I have a garden. I have a life." The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Beautiful. "I'm not going to say I've forgiven myself. I don't know if I ever will. You should be here instead of me. But I'm trying to honor your memory by being useful, by saving people when I can, by not wasting the second chance I've been given." Eleanor stood, brushing grass from her trousers. "I miss you, Sarah, every day. But I'm going to be okay. And I hope, wherever you are, you're at peace." She walked back to her car slowly, feeling lighter than she had in 4 years. The grief was still there. It would always be there. But it no longer consumed her. It was part of her story, but not the entire story. She drove back to Willowbridge as darkness fell. The village lights twinkled in the valley below as she crested the hill. Home. It truly felt like home now. Dorothy was waiting on her doorstep with a thermos of tea. "I thought you might need this," Dorothy said simply. They sat together in Eleanor's garden, drinking tea and watching the stars emerge. They did not talk much. They did not need to. Some friendships were built on words, others on understanding. "Thank you," Eleanor said eventually, for everything, for welcoming me, for helping me heal, for being patient when I was broken." "You were never broken," Dorothy said firmly. "You were hurt. That's different. Broken things don't heal. Hurt things do." Eleanor smiled in the darkness. "You're a wise woman, Dorothy Ashworth. I'm an old woman who's seen some things. There's a difference." They sat in comfortable silence until the tea was gone and the night had grown cold. Then Dorothy stood, patted Eleanor's shoulder, and went home to her own cottage. Eleanor remained outside a while longer. The sky was clear and vast, full of stars. She thought about all the flights she had flown, all the rescues she had executed, all the lives she had touched. She thought about Sarah and the crew and the missions and the terror and the joy of it all. That life was over, but a new life had begun. Different, quieter, smaller in scope, but no less meaningful. She was Eleanor Hart. She was 59 years old. She had been a pilot, a rescuer, a soldier. Now she was a post office worker, a teacher, a neighbor, a friend. She was all of these things, and she was finally, truly, okay. Epilogue. 1 year later, the Willowbridge emergency response team had grown to 40 members. They had proper equipment now, a shed full of rescue gear, several drones. Eleanor had taught 6 people to fly them. First aid supplies, communication radios, emergency boats for potential floods. They had not needed to use most of it. The year since the flood had been blessedly calm, weather-wise, but the team trained regularly, met monthly, and had become an important part of the community. Eleanor was the lead instructor, officially now. The council had created a paid position for her, Emergency Response Coordinator. It was part-time, combining with her post office work to give her a full schedule. She liked being busy, liked being useful, liked teaching young people how to stay calm in crises, how to assess situations, how to help their neighbors. Tom had become her closest friend in the village. He and Eleanor worked together on various projects, improving the flood defenses, creating emergency evacuation plans, even consulting with other communities setting up their own response teams. One autumn evening, Tom stopped by Eleanor's cottage with an unusual request. "I'm thinking of getting my pilot's license," he said. "Recreational flying, small planes. And I was wondering if you'd come with me on my first lesson, for moral support."
Eleanor's immediate reaction was panic. Flying, cockpits, the sky, all the things she had avoided for nearly 4 years now. But then she thought about it. Really thought about it. She had flown a drone in a storm. She taught rescue techniques. She had confronted her past and made peace with it. Maybe it was time for one more step. "Yes," she said, "I'll come." The airfield was small and private, 40 minutes from Willowbridge. When they arrived, Eleanor felt her heart rate increase, but it was manageable. Anxiety, not panic. There was a difference. Tom's instructor was a retired commercial pilot named James, patient and thorough. He explained the pre-flight checks, the instruments, the basics of control. "Would you like to sit in the back, Miss Hart?" James asked. "Tom says you're a former pilot yourself." "I was," Eleanor said, "a long time ago." They climbed into the small Cessna. Eleanor sat behind Tom, looking at the instrument panel, the yoke, the switches and buttons that had once been as familiar as breathing. The engine started with a roar. The plane began to taxi. And then, impossibly, they were lifting off. The ground fell away. The horizon opened up. They were flying. Eleanor's breath caught. Fear, yes, but also something else. Something she thought she had lost forever. Wonder. The pure, simple joy of being airborne, of seeing the world spread out below like a living map, of feeling the freedom of 3-dimensional movement. Tears ran down her face, but she was smiling. She was actually smiling. Tom looked back at her and grinned. "Amazing, isn't it?" "Yes," Eleanor whispered. "It really is." They flew for an hour. Tom practiced basic maneuvers under James's instruction. Eleanor simply watched and felt and remembered. This was why she had become a pilot in the first place. Not for the adrenaline of rescues or the prestige of the uniform, but for this, the simple miracle of flight. When they landed, Eleanor was exhausted and exhilarated. "Thank you," she told Tom, "for inviting me. I didn't know how much I needed that." "I had a feeling," Tom said. "You can take the pilot out of the sky, but you can't take the sky out of the pilot." Eleanor laughed. It was a terrible cliché, but it was also true. That night, she had a dream about flying. But it was not a nightmare. It was just a dream. She was piloting a helicopter over calm blue water, Sarah in the co-pilot seat, both of them smiling. When she woke, she remembered the feeling of peace. The next day was Saturday. Eleanor opened the post office at 9 o'clock as usual. Mr. Greaves came in for stamps. Mrs. Wilson posted a finally, packaged parcel. Tommy Bradley needed to replace his bank card, again. The same routine she had followed for nearly 4 years, but it did not feel like a small life anymore. It felt like a good life, a full life, a life with meaning and purpose and connection. At noon, Eleanor closed the post office for lunch and walked through the village. It was a beautiful autumn day, the trees painted in gold and red. She waved to Mrs. Patel at the shop, stopped to chat with Dorothy on her bench by the green, helped an elderly gentleman carry his shopping bags. These small interactions, these tiny moments of service, they mattered. They were not dramatic rescues or headline news, but they were the fabric of community, the threads that held people together. Eleanor climbed the hill behind her cottage and looked back at Willowbridge, spread out in the valley below. The stone bridge crossing the river, the church tower reaching toward the sky, the cottages with their chimneys and gardens, the people going about their quiet lives. This was home, not her final destination, perhaps. Life was long and full of surprises, but for now, for this moment, this chapter, Willowbridge was exactly where she needed to be. She was Eleanor Hart. She was 60 years old. She had survived trauma and loss. She had hidden and healed. She had found the courage to act when it mattered. She had made peace with her past while building a future. She was a pilot who no longer flew professionally. She was a hero who sold stamps at the post office. She was a teacher, a friend, a neighbor, a survivor. She was all of these things, and she was enough. Eleanor took a deep breath of the clean autumn air and smiled. Sarah's voice seemed to echo in the wind. "Well done, Elle." "Well done." Then Eleanor turned and walked back down the hill toward the village. There was work to do, friends to see, a life to live, and for the first time in years, she was genuinely looking forward to it. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear what inspired you the most. And where in the world are you watching from? Let us know below.